I recently finished Dragon's Dogma 2, and after completing the game, I realized I had some very mixed feelings on this game. So today, I wanted to share my thoughts and give my review on Dragon's Dogma 2. I want to start things off by saying that I did play the original a long time ago, however, I never finished it and honestly hardly remember anything about it. So this review is going to be more from the perspective of someone who would be brand new to the series, even though I'm not actually all that new to it. Kicking things off, let's start with the character creation since that's where you start in the game as well. Character creation in Dragon's Dogma 2 is really well done and is even important to your experience rather than just being all about the cosmetics. The choices you make creating your character actually impact your gameplay. Making your character taller and stronger increases your carry weight and overall strength but makes you slower, whereas making your character smaller makes you faster and more agile at the cost of overall strength and carry weight. Dragon's Dogma 2 lets you go very in depth if you want to when it comes to creating your character, and is honestly pretty refreshing to see how the way you create your character impacts your gameplay rather than just being all about looking cool or whatever this is. Moving past character creation, we are then thrown into the game and the world and story begins to open itself up to us. Starting with the world design in Dragon's Dogma 2 is absolutely incredible. The scale of the world is massive but still extremely detailed and full of thought around every single corner. Exploring this massive map fills you with a sense of awe and wonder which constantly keeps grabbing your attention and pulling you in multiple directions. Honestly, there is so much packed within the map and it's all optional and pretty easily missed. If I had to pick out one thing that Dragon's Dogma 2 does best, it would hands down be the map design, simply due to the fact that there's so much content stuffed within it and the game never even forces you to go there. It's refreshing to play a game that oozes so much confidence in itself to where it doesn't feel the need to hold the player's hand to show them each little area of the map. Dragon's Dogma 2 does an absolutely incredible job at throwing you into a world and just letting you get lost within it. I honestly cannot give this game enough credit on how good the map design is. Moving past the map design and exploring it, let's focus on the story. I will be talking about the main story here, so if you're trying to avoid any spoilers on it, this is your warning. Skip to the timestamp on screen to avoid it. Kicking things off, the opening to the story is pretty solid. It grabbed my attention nearly right away and did a pretty good job at keeping me invested. However, for the main story, it felt as if the ending was kind of rushed or they just weren't sure how to end it. Essentially, the main story starts off as you being a prisoner but quickly make your escape. You then are approached by several pawns saying that you're the Arisen and that they'll serve you if you command it. Your character realizes that they don't even know what being the Arisen means until they eventually regain a memory where they're fighting off a dragon in a town. This dragon turns you into some extra crispy bacon and munched on your heart like it was a pastry treat. The dragon then told you to find it once you've gained enough strength that both you and the dragon's fate could be determined. Your character eventually wakes up and is told what it means to be the Arisen. Being the Arisen essentially makes you the king of the main kingdom, but you're tasked with a challenge of fighting the same dragon that stole your heart. It's almost like a tradition in a way where if the dragon wins, the Arisen dies and the dragon will eventually choose another person to become Arisen. If the Arisen wins, the dragon dies and the cycle ends. For as long as anyone knew, the dragon had never been defeated. You find out that the current queen plotted against you by making a fake Arisen and sent you away to the prison you were at in the beginning and put a curse on you to make you forget that you're the real Arisen. Fast forwarding a bit, you find out the queen has her little side piece and he's been trying to harness the power of the real Arisen with some shiny rocks and gems and wants to use that power to prevent you from ever actually proving that you're the real Arisen. Once you confront him, he uses his power he obtained to try to kill you, only to have accidentally summoned the dragon that stole your heart. This dragon turned him into crispy bacon and took you to fight once and for all. Once you beat him, you become the king and the main story is over. Unfortunately, we get absolutely no follow-up on what happens with the queen. Was she arrested? Did she run away trying to avoid the consequences to her actions? Is she dead? The ending of the main story just left me with a lot of questions and didn't feel like it was wrapped up the best it could be. It's by no means a bad ending to the story, but it's also not very good either. Side quests in Dragon's Dogma 2 are amazing. Each side quest feels different and they're not a bunch of go get this item and bring it back to me. Instead, most of them are filled with an actual sense of adventure and uncovering the story behind it. And not only are the side quests really good, but there's also a lot of them. Honestly, doing them all in one playthrough is probably nearly impossible due to the sheer amount of them. Side content in Dragon's Dogma 2 is extremely well done and meshes perfectly with the packed world, allowing you to just get more and more lost within it. Moving past the story, let me talk about the pawns. If you don't know what they are, pawns are essentially companions and you can have a max of 3 pawns with you at one time. The pawn you create in the beginning of the game is your main pawn and the other 2 you have to hire them either by finding them roaming the roads and in towns or by visiting riftstones. Every pawn is created by a player, minus a few starting pawns, those were created by the devs. You can even search for specific pawns in riftstones, so if your friend made a pawn pawn you'd like to use, you can search for the pawn and use them. If you'd like to use my pawn, all you'd have to do is follow the steps I'm showing you on screen, then put in my pawn's code and you'd be able to use Giga Chad. Pawns can contract a sickness from fighting drakes and dragons called Dragon's Plague. If they get this sickness, it can spread to other NPCs in your world and will eventually kill them. The only way to stop Dragon's Plague from spreading is either by throwing the infected pawn into some deep water, which will kill them, or by dismissing the pawn if it's not your main one. I don't know how common Dragon's Plague actually is, because I was so afraid of it, I tried to avoid fighting drakes and dragons as much as possible, and none of my pawns ever ended up getting it. The pawn's AI is both pretty good and pretty terrible at the same time. Sometimes pawns will be the most useful aspect, and other times they'll want to give you uppies for no reason in the middle of a fight. I saw that there was an update planned for improving the pawn's AI, so hopefully this is just some sort of bug when they start acting dumb, but I felt it was at least worth mentioning since I had several moments of my pawns being more frustrating to try to manage than actually being useful. They were useful most of the time, just sometimes I really wanted to throw them off the tallest mountain I could climb and never look back. From a technical standpoint, Dragon's Dogma 2 isn't the smoothest running game in the world. It has a ton of FPS issues, especially in large towns, and NPCs phase into and out of existence extremely close to you, which kind of takes away from the immersion a bit. When the game first launched, I had a ton of crashes, but those issues have seemed to mostly go away after a few updates. Occasionally, I'd still crash, but they became a lot more rare rather than at launch. It was almost guaranteed to crash at least once. Personally, I didn't like how the game felt on controller at all, even though it's recommended to play on controller. I felt like I couldn't control the camera and was fighting against it more than anything. So I played on keyboard and mouse the entire time, and honestly, it was a lot more enjoyable in my opinion. However, I think this is just a me thing because I haven't seen anyone saying they don't like how the game feels on controller. So take what I say about it with a grain of salt. You may not mind it, but if you find yourself not enjoying it, try playing on keyboard and mouse and see if it feels any better. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed Dragon's Dogma 2. As it stands, it's my current game of the year. However, it's not like it can't be beaten. I don't think this game is for everyone, but if you're looking for a fantasy RPG with giant monsters that you can fight and a world you can get lost in for hours, then I think you'd really enjoy Dragon's Dogma 2. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. Have you played Dragon's Dogma 2 yet? If so, are you enjoying it, or is it not really for you? Let me know down in the comments, and if you like anything and everything about gaming, you should subscribe, so that way you never miss a video.